Good morning. My name is Tricia Doxey. I'm a reporter with the Daily Freeman newspaper. I'm here with Legislature Chairman David Donaldson this morning. Good morning, Dave. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks
we're
for
gonna
having me.
we're going to be talking for about 45 minutes today about some of the issues facing Ulster County and your kind of priorities for the upcoming year. As I said, I'm Patricia Doxey. I'm a reporter. We're joined also by Yvonne Lahara, who is our senior editor and the technical side of this operation. Generally, I like to give you our folks a couple of minutes just to make an opening statement, kind of as way of introduction, and tell us who you are and a little bit about yourself. So, if you'd like to do that, Dave, please.
Sure. I'm starting my 27th year as a county legislator. I believe I'm now the longest serving member because Rich Gerantine retired the end of this year. Prior to that, I served in the Common Council for 8 years. So the community means a great deal to me, and I've been representing it for quite some time. In fact, when I first began, you ran as a at large, and the top 5 vote getters are who got in the city of Kingston to serve on the legislature. Since then, I pushed for single member districts, which we ended up having. I also pushed for a reduction in the legislature, which we ended up doing. I also was part of the thing to change to a county executive form of government. And the reason I backed that is I ended up being the last chief executive officer chairman. I chaired the legislature, and I was also the chief executive officer. That was under the old form of government, and I found that a little troublesome. I mean, I was a full-time teacher at the same time, being in control of a $300 million budget didn't seem like smart governance. So that's one of the reasons why we pushed towards that. And I also ended up being the first chairman under the new form of government. I was the transition person. And then recently I was tapped to be the chair, sort of as a compromise candidate. I wasn't looking to do it, but duty calls to do it.
Well, we were going to talk about that first this morning, but there were some events that took place on Friday that sort of have preempted all of the questions that I had for you, and we're going to talk about that first, I think. On Friday, the county executive, Pat Ryan, announced that Andrew Kossover, the county public defender, who, incidentally, you appointed in 2006, has resigned. And he resigned following the discovery by the Ryan administration that Mr. Kossover failed to submit for about $2.5 million in reimbursements for the state government for the public defender's office operation, leaving taxpayers obviously on the hook for that. I guess my first question is your reaction to that news.
Well, I was taken back when I received that call because for one, the press release was going out about these allegations of the public defender not applying for the state money for operational purposes for the past 6 years. Now, the press release went out the same time I got the phone call. That's problematic for me because, for one, it was also done on a Friday at 4:00. So at 4:00 on a Friday, there's no way, and a long weekend, by the way, there's no way for me to collaborate any information outside of what is being fed to me. My mindset is I would prefer, I don't like to be force fed. I want to know that I want to find the information out. I want to make sure that I got the information correct. And how do you do that? I can't do it. I can't even start to do it till tomorrow because it was a long weekend. So I mean, I have a number of people making phone calls to different people to get more questions, particularly from the state. But my real concern has to be, if this is all true, And by the way, I did it. Yes, I hired Andy Kostover in 2006 when I first got elected as the chairman. We did it through an interview process, and it really was about his passion at defending indigent people. That's how he ended up getting the job. Because in the past, we've had public defenders. The head of the public defenders department almost was an arm of the DA's office in some ways, and which was troublesome to me because I want a public defender to be passionate about defending those people. And he was very passionate, and he actually dedicated his life to that even prior to him becoming a public defender. And then in 2009, when we changed it over to the new form of government, Mike Hine then appointed him, and the legislature approved him at that point. And if you take a look, they're claiming it starts in 2014 that they weren't getting paid. Now, my problem is there's a lot of, with that press release, there's a lot of questions that are not answered. More questions that are not answered than are answered. How did our auditors miss this? How did the finance department miss this? And everyone that I spoke to, and believe me, I spoke to a lot of people over the weekend because once I got that on Friday, my phone was blowing up. And everyone to a T said, how would the former county executive, Mike Hine, allow this to happen? And every one of them also to a T said they can't see that happening. And the reason they can't see that happening is, I've had my differences with Mike Hine, and it's been no secret about that. But the one thing I've always said about him, he was an excellent administrator. He kept his, he always kept his eye on the budget. And I may not have agreed with his leadership styles at points, but I can never question it. And everyone that I called said the same thing. So that's why I need to have these things verified before I continue. Let me turn that off. I'm sorry.
Oh, that was exciting.
About that. Did you wake you up? Yeah, well, he was sleeping over there. So my concern is I need to have these things verified. We may need to end up having to do an investigation to deal with this issue. I also question the idea that the importance of having this sent out on Friday at 4:00. I don't quite understand the purpose of that. Why it was sent out on Friday and why I got a call on Friday when we could have had it. If we knew this, we could have started dealing with this. You call me on Monday, and we can sit down. I want to run through the facts, get a real understanding of where you're coming from, because I still have a lot of questions, and those questions have not been answered. And particularly in the light that you're talking about a human being that has dedicated his life to helping indigent, people in the legal system, and you're just going to hang him in public right off the bat.
It's interesting that you bring that up because we've seen this happen before, where the county executive released a very damning press release before he contacted the legislators, and that was the Hector Rodriguez case.
Yes.
Same sort of scenario. That thing came late in the day.
Friday afternoon, 4:00.
And when I started to reach out, in fact, my first phone call was obviously to former legislator Rodriguez. He had no idea what I was talking about because he hadn't even been informed. And that was true of all of the legislators that I spoke with. They said the first time they knew about this was when the county executive issued his press release. I know that the legislature is concerned and has been since the sort of county charter form of government came about your role in county government. And this seems, the county executive not telling you guys first that there's a problem and sending this information out at the end of the day on a weekend.
Well, exactly, and not even it's even a long weekend, but which means you just brew over the weekend, trying to figure out what's going on. And like I said, I've been on the after that. I think on from that point on, I was on the phone probably about 4 hours on Friday, about 8 hours on Saturday, without exaggeration. Yesterday, I was on the phone probably about 6 or 7 hours, and I mean actual on it for talking. And so, in other words, I'm trying to field a lot of questions and a lot of things that I cannot answer. And I have to explain that, you know what? I also had a conversation with Andy Kossover. He feels that there's a totally different picture here. Now, so as a result, I had to investigate this. I'm not talking about, if he did the wrongdoing, if he did not file those papers like he was supposed to, it's not a criminal act.
Right.
He made a mistake, a big mistake. And if that's the case, he probably should go. But the point is, do you hang someone on a Friday with that? The way it was done, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with treating human beings in that manner. And with the Hector Rodriguez thing, the same type of thing. I mean, if you looked at the report was mostly innuendos. And I mean, granted, there was things that were wrong. But the method in which the press release went out, he was treated like he was Harvey Weinstein. And to me, that hurts. Things like that really hurt the Me Too movement, because then you're turning somebody that maybe makes little sexual comments to somebody in an inappropriate way that you can brush off, as opposed to somebody that's actually raping people. I mean, you can't make those comparisons, and it should never be made. And because so as a result, you took that person and made him look like Harvey Weinstein, and here you're almost making Andy Casso look like he's a criminal, and he's not a criminal. He did not break the law. He did not. In other words, if he did this, then he shouldn't be there. But who else shouldn't be there is what my question is. We have a finance department that runs through these things every day and every budget. Are you telling me each year they showed up? Oh, we didn't get the money. Oh, we'll worry about it next year. Oh, we didn't get the money for the last 2 years. Oh, we'll worry about it next year. I mean, how long do you do that if that's the case? Or did you not know that you were not getting the money? Now, I know very well that the public defender repeatedly asked for a grant writer in his department. And then he pointed that out because he repeatedly asked for that. And I know very well that, in fact, Legislator Bartels and Legislator Rodriguez, a few years ago, was trying to push for a grant writer for that office. And like they have in other offices. But not only that, but we have grant writers within that do other types of grant writing. I don't understand why they would not be part of making sure that this office puts that paperwork in. But if that's the case, I don't know, because I'm getting conflicting information. Some of the conflicting information is that is not what he didn't put in.
Well, and that's interesting, because one of the questions that I had when I looked at this press release on Friday was they talked about a $2.5 million. $2.5 million, 1.9 of it was spent, I think they said, over 6 years. Year after year.
Claiming also that it was 3% of tax levy, which is, I don't know where that number came from, because it's just not accurate.
Year after year, and let me ask you about that in a second. The county has ended with a surplus in its fund balance, right? We have not, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in the past several years, although the budget includes money from the fund balance to be used, it hasn't been used. So I said, well, if this is money that's missing and the county is still coming out ahead of the game sort of financially, right? You're still ending the year with a surplus. Are you overtaxing to begin with?
Well, that's a good question. I think a lot of times when we do budgeting, we want to make sure that, you really want to make sure that you have enough. You don't want to be short. And in the end, it's about a lot of it has to do with estimating what the sales tax is going to be.
Hmm.
That's one of the big, that's always a guesstimate. You really
Okay.
don't. I mean, you can only do what you can. I mean, I know for one point, if you go back into 2009 and 10, we ended up receiving less than what we budgeted for in sales tax because you're always figuring it's going to go up a little bit, but it actually went down, and it was like almost an anomaly for 2 years in a row. So we had to tap in heavy duty into the fund balance. So I think is people want continuity in their bill more than they want. In other words, I want to know that I'm going to be paying about that same amount that I paid last year. I'm comfortable with that. If I get $100 break instead or $200 off, and then the following year I end up having to pay 300 more,
Hmm.
people don't like. I think people prefer that
Sort of
that
continuity.
study because they know what it's going. They know what they're going to be budgeting for.
So the comptroller's office actually issued a an audit in January of 2019, sort of highlighting some of these concerns. And I can't, again, 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Today is Monday, President's Day. The county offices are closed. I can't call and find out if if this money that the administration is claiming wasn't submitted for reimbursement for are the same programs that the
Right,
comptroller
and I don't
audited.
either. And I don't either. I mean, I'm trying to find that out. In fact, I made some calls to a couple of people that are a little more in the know, and they're not sure. Um, you know, um,
But
I
but
did talk with Eve Walters, who was the new chairman of the Law Enforcement Committee, who was actually very versed in this information, better than I am. And so, um,
but there was
I
an audit, and that audit
right,
did say that the public defender's office wasn't submitting for reimbursement the way that it should have been.
right.
That came out in 2019.
But I
Um,
believe he also made a comment even earlier. There's been
okay,
comments by the controller earlier about having grant writers in there.
yes. Um, does the legislature see those
The
audits?
legislature
Do you
does
not
see
follow up
those.
on those things?
The legislature does see those. The problem was that a lot of times there wasn't necessarily a lot of trust in the controller's office audits. But having said that, um, they I don't know. I can't really answer the question whether if because I believe what he was talking about was different. What he was talking about was the ones that you apply for if you hire more people.
Okay,
Like there's grants if you want to, in other words, you can justify you want to hire more people. I mean, you apply for the grants and they give you something like 50% of the pay for the first year, but then you eat it yourself later.
right.
And that was one of the reasons why I know that Andy used to put in for those grants all the time. And they would go in the books as putting in for it, and sometimes even put the revenue that you might get from it. But then it was never applied for because they would not let them to follow through with that because they didn't want to do the hire
Gotcha.
because it was still going to cost money. And then so as you know, and a lot of times people don't quite understand. Oh, well, you get a grant, but sometimes you get a grant. That means you may have to pay for half of it. So you have to really evaluate whether you want to pay for half of what that particular program is. That program enough for you to pay? Even maybe you could have got it would cost you 400,000 if you did it on your own, but is it worth paying 200,000? You have to weigh those options. And Mike Hine always felt that no, it wasn't worth it, so they would not put in for those.
Okay.
But but Andy put in for them every year just for the purpose of maybe somebody changed their mind. We have it set there, and we can get it if we want to. So that's
So
what my concern is. I don't know if that's what they're talking about. I don't know if the controller was talking about that because the press release went out on Friday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
so the press release went out at 4 o'clock on the Friday afternoon. This is when you found out. Um, how do you think that this speaks to one, the county executive's promises of transparency in his government, and two, the legislature's ability or confidence in its ability to work with the county executive going forward if on two instances since he was elected, on two extraordinarily important matters, you were not brought into the loop until basically the public was brought into the loop.
Well, I don't know if it's a transparency problem for the public because he's throwing that out. But it does beg to, what is his importance on being a partner, as being a team player. That's my concern because I don't feel quite like a member of the team. I feel like I'm sitting in the stands at this point, and I'm the chairman of the legislature, and that's troublesome if you feel like you're sitting in the stands. Because we have the power of the purse. We're the ones that, this type of thing should have been brought to us immediately. We should have been made aware of this after the second or third year. Because sometimes, things when it comes to grants, sometimes the state will hold up the money just because they don't have it. And we've seen that repeatedly in New York, as you know. They don't have the cash. So what they do is they hold everybody's money back, and you end up getting it the year later. And that's the way they operate. So you have to, sometimes you just have to figure that out. It's part of the game of understanding the budgeting process. But the idea that we weren't included in this, why would not the chief financial officer, who actually is answerable to the executive and the county legislature, that is in the charter, why was that not explained to the legislature that this money was not being collected? My understanding is there's emails about this, but I can't get them either. And I don't know if we're going to have to subpoena these things, or because put it this way, I'm very upset about this. I'm upset the way it was handled. I'm upset the way it was handled with a human being, that did not commit a crime. And there's ways of dealing with this without sensationalizing things and still getting things done. I mean, there's absolutely no reason. And I'm going to do everything in my power in the legislature, and I can speak for the majority leader and the minority leader because I've had conversations with them that we'll do everything in our power to make sure we recoup whatever money that we didn't get, if that's the case. I still don't know if that is the case. I'm told that on a Friday at 4:00 after a press release went out. So I still can't verify anything. Start verifying until Monday, which is going to take me some time. Tuesday rather, which is going to tomorrow, which is still going to take time.
So how do you think that this then speaks to the future relationship
It
between the
doesn't speak well.
legislature and the?
It does not speak well at this point, and I hope this changes. I've met with Pat a great number of times, and I have a good relationship, I thought. But now I feel that it's a one-way relationship because I don't feel the trust. I don't feel that point that, hey, I would like to know, hey, this is what's taking place. This is the proof. Let me show you this. This is what our people look through. But so I'm extremely concerned about it, as is the majority leader and the minority leader, and any legislator that I talk to.
So just I think that we've talked about this for quite a bit of time, and I think that it's worth talking about. But as you say, at this point, there's nothing you can know and nothing you can find out because it came out right before the weekend and right before a holiday weekend. So tomorrow is the first time that government is back in action.
Right. Which is not going to be easy because we have to chase this information down from the state. And we have to bring call auditors in. We really have to. I'm assuming we're going to have some type of investigation of this because it goes beyond the idea of just the public defender not putting this in. It shows that there's some kind of hole in our system that didn't pick that up, if that's the case. And if it's not the case, if there's something wrong, then we have a serious problem with how the administration is working.
Will you be, as the chairman of the legislature, will you be forming or calling for an investigation?
I believe I am. I have not totally made that decision. I mean, I'm going to investigate, but I'm not sure if I want to create a formal investigation. I may still do that. I've had conversations. I've had people think that I should, and people are saying not to. But right now, I have to really weigh it. But I have to find out what I get tomorrow, by the end of the day tomorrow, and then I'll know.
And instituting an investigation is within the purview of the county legislature?
We can have an investigation. We can subpoena people. We can, no different than, like the Senate does in the U.S. government.
Could you hire an outside auditor?
If we need to, yes.
Is this something that
we have an outside auditor. So we may, that person's going to be called in, whoever, the outside auditor is going to have to be called in, because want to know why they didn't tell us that. So we got to start tracking down all this information and how it came about. And I'm at a point where I don't know if I can trust the information that I'm getting. So therefore, I have to get it independently.
And again, how if here we are this many months into an administration who will be and that will be in place for the next 4 years, that sounds like a pretty difficult place to govern from when you're not sure if you can trust the information.
Well, I'm hoping that I can trust it, but right now I'm not in a trusting mood. But I want to trust this information, but I have to verify it before I start trusting information again. When I get blindsided in this manner, it's just not the way to do things. I just feel it's the wrong way of doing things. I would not do that. That's not my method of doing it. I can tell you that.
Which it makes sort of a easy transition in from this topic to the fact that here you are once again, the chairman of the legislature. This is not something that you were necessarily looking forward to. In fact, the day before your election, we spoke and you said absolutely not. Then that night, there you were being elected chairman.
Right. Well, I'd have to say, duty calls and you have to answer it. And I was kind of humbled by it, that they wanted me to do it. So
because you were the only person, right, out of the entire Democratic caucus, you were the only person that the rest of the Democrats would coalesce around.
Right. And then I also had people from the other side that was going to. So, it's an honor. It really, truly is an honor, because, you don't get that type of thing often.
How do you suppose that this time around is going to be different for you than the last time around?
Well, the last time around, it was much more difficult, obviously. I was the chief executive officer, so it was, and I was working full time. Remember, I think it was Tom Cajun that said to me the one time, he goes, "Geez, you're busier than a one-armed paper hanger." Yeah, you're right. And he said that to me, because I always remember that quote, because the first time I ever heard it. So, so it's a different game. I'm retired from teaching. I don't teach any longer, and I'm not the chief executive officer, so I don't have that on my shoulders. So it's very significantly easier position to carry out. And, my leadership styles is I allow others to do the work, if you know what I mean. I depend on, I try to appoint people in in their leadership positions in the committees and things like that know what they're doing. I don't try to do it in a political manner as much as maybe other people do. My mindset is I want the best person in that spot that's going to be able to carry that out. Because in the end, that's less work for me. So I'm technically lazy. So, I want everybody else to do the work.
Well, and that's interesting because one of the sort of the mantras of elected politics is to the victor go the spoils, right?
Right.
You appointed Republicans to chair two key committees, which is unusual. Usually, the Republicans appoint their people to chair committees, and the
Well,
Democrats appoint
right.
theirs. And here you've crossed the aisle.
Well, you know what? It is a 12-11 legislature. It's not like it's, the people said, I got, 20 Democrats and 3 Republicans on there. It's a 12-11 legislature. So, and if you look at my record through the out time, for instance, I was the one that changed the idea that the chairman and the deputy chairman had to come from the opposite party. In other words, I actually put that rule change in when I became. In other words, when I became chairman, I had the rule change codified because my mindset is I'd rather see a legislature working as a team, and it creates more of a team approach when you turn around and you include everybody. So for instance, when the deputy chair and the chair are included on information that they need to know, at certain points, and stuff that's not necessarily going out to everybody, they'll both get it. So therefore, you're getting both caucuses understanding the information, and I think I think it works better. I mean, that's my mindset. Is the way I do it. I don't look at it the same thing when I was a chairman when I hired people. I mean, I wasn't going to hire political hacks. I couldn't do it. To me, it was too important, not only for the county, but also for me personally. I mean, it reflects on who I am. If they're screwing up, oh well, I'm screwing up.
So do you think that this is the way you sort of need to govern in a 12-11 legislature in order to get things done?
Yes. Yeah, because you're always going to, and I mean, I had that situation in my last couple of years when it was a closer one. The first couple of years, we had a significant control. But even after that, I tended to have a coalition of the reasonable, as what I referred to it, because I had people of my own party that, were fighting me tooth and nail, and then, people from the Republican Party fighting me tooth and nail, a certain amount of them, but there were just ones in the middle that I was able to get things accomplished, when I was the chief executive officer, because I was, holding sort of two positions in one. In order to do that, I had to have a code I with Wayne Harris that referred to it as the coalition of the reasonable. And so I depended on Wayne Harris, who was a Republican, a great deal at times.
You were the chairman of the legislature when the charter form of government was adopted. You were involved in sort of the crafting of the charter and figuring out how that was going to work, and delineating the roles of the branches of government. The county now has been operating under the charter since 2009, right? Hein was elected in 8, took office in 9, so it's been 11 years. Is the legislature living up to what you envisioned its role to be under the county charter?
It just began to.
When did it just begin to?
It just began just prior to Mike Hein deciding he was leaving. The legislature began to start stepping up to the plate. In other words, doing their position more, doing more oversight. Prior to that, they were not. And I think actually Jerry Benjamin predicted it to go that way. Most people, if they don't know Jerry Benjamin, he's like the local government expert. He's an expert on local government, not only around here, but statewide and actually national-wise. I mean, he knows what he's talking about. But he actually talked about that idea that the legislature will eventually find its position, but it takes a while. Because what happens is you have a new county executive, everybody wants it to work, and sort of working on making sure that that works. And so I felt they weren't stepping up. They needed to step up, but I think they began to step up. Probably right towards well, just prior to Mike leaving, they began to start. You can see different things that were taking place. Things that were resolutions being passed that he didn't want passed, and they were being happening anyway, and he wasn't going to veto them because he knew they'd be overridden. So he began to be a change. And then now with a new executive being appointed, I think you'll see it more.
In terms of the legislature,
yes, pushing
using its voice.
Yes.
First resolution, right after the county executive was elected, he vetoed one of the first resolutions the legislature passed. He vetoed.
That was the resolution.
That was the Dan Torres. They call it the Dan Torres resolution. Although that resolution had been debated even before Ryan had been elected, because there was something over at the Board of Elections.
Yes, it was about. It was over the Board of Elections because it was a person over there that was a member of the Board of Elections. I think they were second in command, that was holding a elected position in a town.
Where did
we felt that was, I feel that was wrong. I don't think members of the Board of Elections should be running for elections because it's just a conflict.
What about elected officials taking other positions like the assistant deputy county executive? How do you feel about those kinds of positions?
I'm not comfortable with them, and so I disagree with it. But having said that, I can see the argument that it's not that bad. But I do disagree with it. I just don't think. I think there's you have a conflict there. Because what you're doing is you're sitting on a town board, and then you're advocating for money out of the county, and the county, and you're the deputy county executive, so you're advocating money from yourself.
The administration has claimed that was directed specifically towards Dan Torres, and it was a personality issue.
I could see why he would feel that. And he made that comment, and I made the comment to him directly. I don't, to me, I could care less who it was. I just disagree with the way that particular position. I also disagree with the idea that the position was hired and then you increased his pay by $20,000. Disagree with that too. And I made that comment, and I voted in that method to stop that, but it didn't. Same thing.
So next month, I think you will be outlining your priorities, right, in your address before the legislature.
Tomorrow.
Oh, it'll be tomorrow.
Yes.
I thought it was in March. I'm sorry.
No,
okay.
Typically the majority leader and the minority leader do that in March.
And you do it in February.
We do it in February. When I was chairman before, I did it in January because I felt that I didn't like the idea that I was going to wait till February. Just to me, it didn't make sense. Today's world, it does make more sense. Because you're coming in, the county executive does his thing in January, and then it becomes more of a.
So, can you talk to me a little bit about what your priorities are going to be and some of the things you're going to say? And I'm going to just point out to you so that you're aware. I know that you have another meeting at noon, and it is 11:39. Thank you.
All right, very good. Well, I think we do have a unique opportunity before us in today's, because of, we have a new county executive, we have a new controller, we have a number of new legislators that I find extremely impressive. It's probably the most impressive group of freshmen that I've seen that came in quite a while. And we also have a number of legislators that, with the knowledge and the experience there. So I'm really looking forward. I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And I'd like to see us embrace this atmosphere of a team Ulster County. I'm going to do everything I can to do that team Ulster County within our caucuses and with all elected officials. But of course, I have to have that reciprocated. Um, I had a, I also have like for instance, I'll use an example I was actually going to say in my speech was my friend John Parody, when he stood before the legislature, it wasn't that long ago, he used a tailor's tape, as an analogy of his lifeline and how he didn't have as much of that left that he would like to. And I can use that same analogy. Um, I just don't want to get involved in the politics, the petty bickering, the personal agendas, the highlighting of our differences. I really can't. I don't have the time to afford that. And I don't think we as a county have the time to afford that. So I'm going to try to do whatever I can to make a team Ulster County. That's the one point that I'm going to do. And I have experience doing that. In fact, I got a text from Dean Fabiano today,
A
who,
Republican in the legislature.
who I worked with in the past. And, you know, he was, happy. He's kind of happy that I'm going to be the chairman. And, so it's, I want to embrace that. I want to make sure that I keep embracing that. I mean, I talk to Ken Rock all the time.
The chairman, the minority leader, right?
And he is probably, I don't think you can get somebody philosophically more opposite than I am. I mean, philosophically, we're like night and day. But I work with him and we've worked well together. We have our differences, but I mean, Waterloo.
Yes, actually. Go ahead and keep in.
All right. Then the other aspect is what I'm going to be zeroing in on housing is a big issue. One of the things about the housing is we're facing a housing crisis that stretches across many demographics, in lower income, working middle class, seniors, empty nesters. They're looking for housing, and the housing is not there. In fact, we had a couple companies that bought up a whole bunch of apartment houses around the Kingston area, and they've increased the rent by as much as 50% in 1 year.
Is there anything the county can do on that?
That's why we have to address that. We must address the idea that there's a housing crisis, and because we live in a beautiful place where the Hudson River meets the Catskills. It's hard to find a place more beautiful than this. And I've done a lot of traveling, and I can tell you it's hard to find a place more beautiful. But if you don't have housing, you can't attract jobs. You can't attract people to come here. You can't attract our children and grandchildren to stay here. So in order to do that, we need to try to figure out a way of increasing our housing stock. And I think we need to a number of things we should be doing. We have a culture of towns. The culture in many of the towns is not to embrace a low income or work fair homes, not to even embrace senior housing for that matter. And we need to change that culture. And what we can do to establish maybe incentives in the towns, we should also examine maybe the use of a land bank for pulling out tax sales and for that may be able to increase the housing on that piece of property. Or in other words, giving them, you can give properties to youth build or Habitat for Humanity. And in fact, within a block of my house, the Habitat for Humanity and youth build both of them have rehabilitated a house there within the last 10 years. And both of those houses are very well kept and they've been enhanced. And they were given to working mothers, blue collar working mothers with a couple of kids. That is how we can increase home ownership at the same time, but at the same time it's increasing housing. We need to rethink the IDA's charge. And the policies and give them the ability to help us increase housing. we've had in the past. I mean, if you had said that to me 10 years ago, I would have said no. Today, I feel that there's a difference. So we need the IDA because that does create jobs. It creates the building, but it also creates the people coming. If you have a housing that's affordable. But as I was saying before, people are buying up the housing and they increase the rents by 50%. I mean, that is because the market will bear it. Why is the market bearing that? Because we don't have enough housing.
Well, we're seeing both that, right? We're seeing that in the city of Kingston, where landlords in some of these complexes are increasing their rent significantly. We also see
up to 50%.
Up to 50%, yeah. And we also see in a number of the sort of more rural communities that rental stock being taken out of the market for Airbnbs.
Correct. And that's the other thing we need to address. So there's we also, what we will need to do, I mean, like I said, bring the IDA in on it. What we need to do is, but first we need to get the concise information that we need about housing. In other words, we have a lot of it. Like we know what some of the stock is, we know certain things, but they're all not all together. And so we need a type of a concise study that puts out what we can do policy-wise. Grab the information, what we can do policy-wise. Can we create a land bank? Can we create a housing authority? There's things that a county may or may not be able to do. And that's the things that we need to explore.
Laura Petit called for the creation of a standalone legislative committee just on housing. That call was rejected.
But that's not going to address the issue. What that's doing is papering the issue in a sense. You can create a committee. All you're doing is taking it out of the committee has it, who actually oversees the IDA. And not only that, before you do it, and I agree with maybe a task force of some sort, but it shouldn't be done until you have the information. You have to have that study first. You have to have the study to find out what we have, what we need, really specifically. We know there's a problem.
Right.
But we can't quite identify it on how to deal with the problem or what the problem really is. We know there's a problem. So we need to identify that. And then I would assign a task force then to take a look at, I don't think it's a standalone committee that needs to be done on the legislature. I think it would be much better done with a task force of members of the legislatures and experts in the field. I think that's the way to go about once we get the study done, once we get an understanding of what we really need.
So will you as chairman of the legislature be calling or commissioning a study of housing? Is this something you do, or is this something that the executive branch does?
Well, I had a conversation with the executive about that. And I said to him, we could either do it or you can request that we do it. I really don't care which way it goes. I mean, I'm not territorial. So, I mean, I would, if you want to do that, you bring it out. In other words, you put the work together on the resolution. I'll make sure it passes. Or we could do it. And I've had the conversation with the chairman of the economic development, Brian Cahill, and he's on the same wavelength. So the three of us are actually on the same wavelength that we've got to do something of that nature. And we all agree that we need to pinpoint exactly what it is our problem is. And I've actually had the conversation with Tracy Bartels also, and basically all four of us agree with that.
Because housing is something that I remember when John Parody was chairman, he said we had to address housing.
Yes.
He also said we had to address the opioid crisis. Do you still see that as
without
a priority?
A doubt, yes. We made some strides in that a certain amount. Like for instance, we have Narcan kits in every emergency responders. We have them in buildings throughout Ulster County, or all of our buildings, and then many other people have taken it upon themselves to have building. I was actually trained to save a life with one of the Narcan kit, and but the problem is not going away. We still have the problem, and we are losing people, and everybody I know, including myself, has had somebody maybe in our extended family or within close family that, have died from an overdose. And, we can't just think about it as the idea, well, they shouldn't be doing drugs. Well, yeah, you're right. But I mean, that's not the point. People get caught up on this, and you can see, the people that are happening it to, it's not just, some bum of some sort. It's people that are well connected, people that, are professionals that are getting caught up on that. And, they get caught up on the pain, starting with the pain pills or whatever it may be. I mean, I could understand it. I mean, I have, from my second operation, my cancer operation, my shoulder sometimes is killing me. And I actually do have prescriptions, but I only will use it if it's at a point where I know I'm not going to sleep or something like that. So I avoid it. So maybe I might use them every couple of weeks. I might use one, and but I can see why somebody would say, "Wow, yeah, let me use this one again tomorrow because I know tomorrow the pain will be there. It may not be as much, so I can bear it. And you get used to dealing with it. If anybody has dealt with pain, you get used to it. It kind of becomes a dull thing that you live with. But sometimes it gets overbearing. So I can really see how people can easily get hooked on things like that.
It's 10 of. I know that you want to go, so I'm
I've
going
got a couple more minutes, so I can
Okay.
5 minutes at most. But I think we also have a criminal justice reform issue that we need to address. Let me get a drink here. We created a task force last year that's being just got formed. And we get towards the end of the year. And the task force is made up of legislators, the DA, the public defender, sheriff, other stakeholders. And what we're going to be looking at in that task force is the bail reform laws. The shrinking use of our jail is going to be an issue. Pretrial services, that's one of the main aspects of bail reform that is, troublesome to many people because they're saying, are the people going to show up? But not only that, I know very well because I've seen it where for instance, I got a traffic ticket down in what's the name of the outlet place there in
Monroe Woodbury.
Monroe Woodbury. And I was going to, fight this traffic ticket because what happened was they changed your parking methods around like during the day for whatever reason. They do it probably for flow. Well, they changed it in the middle of the day when I was there, and I got a ticket. So I'm going to fight the ticket. Guess what? The ticket I had to appear 8 months later. By the time the 8 months, I kept saying, "Oh, I got to appear for this ticket." By the time the 8 months, I forgot it. So I called up and said I forgot it. I wanted to schedule another time. They allowed me to schedule, but they put it out a year later. Guess what? I did. And I kept saying, "Oh, I got to do this. I have it on my calendar and all that." Oh, I forgot it. I ended up just paying the damn bill because I was saying, "Oh, Jesus." But, sometimes, people don't think that, if I got arrested, I would probably make sure I showed up. But not everybody is like that. And sometimes people like me, they'll forget it. And so we have to address that. We have to address that to make people aware. I think people should be made aware. Maybe, in today's world, I don't see it all that difficult. A text, an email, in other words, make sure you have a good contact number and, it can be automatically done. So I think that's an issue, the pretrial hearings, making sure people get to those. We also have to reinvent our criminal justice system, restorative justice. We've been talking about that. We have a building called the Restorative Justice Building, which is a building where we have no programs. So we created a building, but we have no restorative justice programs. So we need to we have no programs dealing with restorative justice. We have one program that deals with children. So
Okay.
it sounded good when you put up the building called the Restorative Justice Building, but there is no restorative justice program. So we need to adjust that and create a criminal justice model that maybe others will begin to emulate.
All right, we've got 6 more minutes, so if you want to just sort of wrap up your anything you want to say to our viewers and readers,
No, I mean,
it's going to be an interesting
it's going to
year,
be an
right?
interesting year. I mean, I have despite what took place on Friday, I still have a lot of optimism that things will go better. We have I think maybe the new county executive, maybe this time it'll, understand what the ramifications are of not including the legislature, and hopefully that won't be done again. At least under my watch, I hope it won't be done again because I'm not real tolerant of that. I get very upset with it, and as I advised the county executive a number of times, I'm here to help you and protect you if I need to, but I have to have something worth protecting.
Okay, I think that does it. We thank you very much
No,
for
you're welcome.
coming in today. You'll be the legislature is meeting tomorrow night, and you'll be delivering your full address to the legislature tomorrow night, where you'll outline again all of your priorities and your hopes for the upcoming year.
Yep, I'm gonna try to make it brief.
It's gonna. I mean, it is going to
Under
be an
10
interesting
minutes.
year, though, right? You've got a lot of, as you said, a lot of new legislators, a lot of new ideas, a little bit more progressive in some regards. The Democratic caucuses this year than it has been in the past. So it's
Like I said before, we have some very impressive new people. I mean, I'm very impressed with the skills of the members that we have coming in. More so than I think I've seen, in a very long time, and I've been there forever. If you know what I mean.
all righty. Well, thank you very much again for joining us, and hope you have a pleasant rest of your day.
Already.